Nearly everything Venat does conflicts with her stated ideals, and as previously mentioned, thematically contradicts everything that preceded Endwalker. There is no indication she tried to explore other alternatives. It appears at the end of Elpis, she's resolved to the Warrior of Light's timeline, with her excuses being a narrative gish gallop. I can no longer view the events surrounding the first as being anything other than proceeding exactly as she wanted. The fact she never revealed the true threat and the purpose behind the sundering to the Ascians casts a shadow over the entire conflict. The Ascians are essentially her controlled opposition. She knew what they would do and paved the way for their existence, while they were unknowingly acting as agents of her agenda. Emet alludes to this in Ultima Thule, which was later confirmed by Yoshida during the Q&A, that Venat had deliberately left an opening for him to escape. This makes Venat undeniably complicit in the rejoinings and her failures by design, especially as there's no evidence she was able or willing to stop them. The Warriors of Light of the Lost Shards may have put up a token resistance, but they needed to fall to bring about the player character on which she'd placed all her hopes. Matter of fact, the calamities align perfectly with her ideology. They are forced resets, often occurring in an apex of mankind. It's not until she's forced to deal with the Medion situation that she starts taking an active role in anything beyond making sure the Warrior of Light doesn't die in order to fulfill the destiny she's created for them. It's in this same Q&A, Yoshida also says Venat working behind the scenes to ensure the time loop is a valid interpretation of events, which I'd argue is the only one that makes sense, because there's no reason to spare Emet otherwise. The writers decided Venat would keep her memories, likely to form a bond between her and the Warrior of Light. Her becoming aware of the sundered world seemed to cause her to give up on her own, with the promise she made to the Warrior of Light looking like she destroyed her people and made countless billions suffer, all for the sake of one person's existence. I suspect everything coming full circle seemed romantic at the time. Venat wanting to ensure the survival of mankind at any cost, regardless of who's hurt in the process, already makes her controversial, but when you interrogate the specifics of her motives, they fall apart. The only reason she could have to spare Emet would be if she is determined to recreate the circumstances that lead to the Warrior of Light being sent to the past, despite knowing billions will die to make that happen. This makes any writing suggesting she didn't want the rejoinings to happen incompatible. It's not something we're intended to dwell on, because thinking about it too much undermines the narrative.
From a purely Ascian standpoint, it could be said that what you seek to do is only logical. But that would be to ignore the immeasurable destruction wrought with each rejoining. You have murdered millions, and this we cannot condone.
It would have been easier for her to sunder Emet and prevent all of the rejoinings. However, if she's dedicated to ensuring the time loop, then any attempt to stop them is counterproductive. This dissonance leaves the player with a vague sense of Venat being dishonest or hypocritical. Furthermore, it feels like the entire scenario surrounding her is nonsense from a mechanical and thematic perspective. You end up with Schrodinger's Venat, simultaneously trying her best to avert the future the Warrior of Light described, while ensuring it comes to pass.
We did everything right! Everything that was asked of us, and still it came to this!
Shadowbringers retroactively is particularly damning, because Venat intentionally aiming for the Warrior of Light's future can be used to explain why she didn't answer the Warriors of Darkness, why she allowed the first to be consumed by light, and why she condemned Ardbert to wander in isolation for 100 years. Menphilia's decisions can only be understood with Venat's foreknowledge. Otherwise, how would she know Ardbert was the Warrior of Light's shard and would be critical to their success? Sparing him without that information serves no purpose.
As the Ascians must serve as instruments of Zodiark's will, so too must others carry out the will of Hydaelyn.
Based on our knowledge, the Warriors of Light she creates have a 100% failure rate. Ardbert and the other Warriors of Light on the First were directly responsible for causing the calamity there, and it's unlikely Hydaelyn wasn't aware of it. We can either presume she chose not to intervene because it needed to happen to result in the player character, or that she's hopelessly incompetent. Nothing in the game supports the latter and insists the opposite. Venat having no issues with sacrificing lives, whether directly or by proxy, is as text as it can be at this point. Should you find that abhorrent, then you find Venat abhorrent. The Warrior of Light also being partly culpable in this is another issue. Nothing else is applicable if Venat's motive was always to close the time loop. Her judgment of the Ancients becomes meaningless if there was never an alternative. Assuming she wasn't trying to intentionally close the loop, then her having this foreknowledge and no hesitancy in putting it to her advantage, only to end up creating the exact same circumstances the Warrior of Light foretold, is ridiculous. The idea that she would not be able to employ any agency in changing events whatsoever from what the Warrior of Light described is incredibly contrived. The Flood of Light in particular could have easily been prevented by giving Ardbert different guidance. Were she trying to change the future, why not behave in ways contrary to what she's been told? She knows she's going to found a group opposed to Zodiark to summon Hydaelyn, and how this all ends in tragedy, but plays into it directly. It's not how someone trying to change the future would act. This excuse is further undermined by Alexander, the only other example of a time loop within the game. Alexander is able to see infinite possibilities, one of which includes preventing the Seventh Umbral Calamity by destroying Dalamud. It was Alexander's decision not to change anything because he viewed himself as a threat. Even though he could reshape history for the better, in his case, doing so would consume so much ether it'd inevitably bring ruin to the world. Venat is starting in the past, with knowledge of the future. She doesn't require vast quantities of ether to travel through time and space to make changes like Alexander does. It's a general criticism of Endwalker and 14 in general that it has no established rules of time travel, and just does whatever it needs in the moment to advance a specific plot. All examples of it within the universe contradict each other in one manner or another, and as a result, it's difficult to accept that Venat is somehow bound by a paradox when conflicting evidence exists that shouldn't be the case.